In this tutorial today I'll be showing you the method that I use to achieve a flawless finish, beautiful ocean resin lacing as well as waterfall edges. For this design I cut the chunky handles from a Crafted Elements template. Then I routed the edges and sanded the wood board so it was nice and smooth. I'm just using standard acrylic based paints and a soft paintbrush. So start by applying the lightest colour first. I'm just going down the sides of my board where there's less knots, and then apply your second colour with the darkest colour on the outside. What you're trying to do is replicate the basic pigment paste colours that you'll use when you're applying your resin. Next you want to mix up your clear resin. I'm using a red and blue cup so that it's easy to identify the hardener from the resin. Once you've mixed your clear resin, I'm just going to be pouring it across the painting part of all of my boards. It's also a good time to fill any knots in your wood with the clear resin. I find that this works better for me than using a wood filler. Now I'm using my gloved hand and I'm wiping that clear resin across all of the acrylic painting, including the knots and the edges. Now just give it a quick blast with the heat gun and leave it overnight. The next day, make sure that your boards are level. Next you want to mix up some clear resin. Then you're going to pour it into each paper cup for each colour, and you want to make sure that you set aside some clear resin. Make sure that you thoroughly mix each of the pigment pastes. So I like to start by pouring the lightest colour first, and I just pour it along the edge of the resin on my boards. Next, pour the second colour along the edge of the first colour on your board. Then pour your final colour, which is the darkest colour, across the top of your board and on the edges. Now, using a gloved hand, wet the sides of your board. This reduces the friction when you're blowing out your ocean waves and helps create the perfect waterfall edges. Now with a clean glove on your hand, very gently blend those surface colours together. I just like to just slowly pull in the light to the dark and the dark to the light. Now pour a line of clear resin along the edge of your lightest blue waterline. Pouring the clear resin before putting on the white creates a better effect for your lacing. It also stops the white from bleeding into the blue colours. So now you're going to pour a nice thick line of white resin along the edge of the clear resin that you've just applied. I like my white resin line to be quite thick so that it gives me good coverage to blow out the waterfall edges. Now, using your heat gun, gently warm up the resin and pop any surface bubbles. This is the first time that I've used the heat gun, and that avoids overheating your resin. Now, on a high power setting on my heat gun, I'm going to push the white pigment paste out across my ocean design. I push one pass first, which gets the resin flowing, and then I'll go back for a second pass. Don't hold the heat gun too long in one spot, and you can just shimmy it out to break up that wave line. Just let your resin naturally waterfall over the edges. Once I've pushed the white out a couple of times across the board, I just leave it. It's really important to let the resin form the cells by itself. A lot of people try to keep heating it, and this is where the resin cooks or gets thin. If you leave the resin, the cells will form over 10-20 minutes, and this is where the magic happens. Because we put that base layer of sealing on this wood, it's given us a flawless, near perfect finish on this first wave line. There's no bubbles or imperfections. The next day, mix up some clear resin if you want to create a second wave line. I just pour the clear resin across the areas of the board that I would like to make my waves. I don't mix any pigment colours into this wave except for my white lacing. Now I pour my pigment white along the edge of that new clear wave line. Now I'm gently warming up that resin, popping the bubbles before I push the white out. On a high heat gun setting, push the white out across the clear, letting it gently waterfall over the edges. Remember not to overheat the resin. Now I cover my board and leave it to fully cure. This can take 5 to 7 days. Once fully cured, you can sand off the resin drips under your board, and then I like to finish the surface of my wood by sanding back to a nice smooth finish. I like to treat my wood with a liquid beeswax. It's a beautiful way to bring out the grain, and it's 100% food safe. Hopefully you learn something and it helps you with your own resin work. So when you've finished creating all of your second wave lines, you need to cover your project and then leave them to fully cure.